a contact when there's questions. We can talk all day about, the great benefits of nuclear energy, but there's also a lot of challenges and unanswered questions, and I think just general, thinking of legacy issues, general information sharing that I don't think, 5, 10, or beyond years ago, the industry was really willing to sort of take that on and address that. And so I see this huge shift in these conversations where our members are really coming to us and saying, no, of course, all the companies have ideas of where they'd like to see new nuclear projects. But at this point, they're also very open to the idea of it's just building that sort of two-way communication, and that if you were interested in a project in a specific community, you need to be engaging that community, building those relationships with that community long before there's even the potential of a project in that community. And they need to know that they can call on you, that you will listen, that it is really, that two-way communication. And so I feel like we've just barely sort of touched the surface on what that new relationship looks like. But I'm excited. I'm sort of reinvigorated on this path forward and where we're headed. I see this as this is a very long-term dialogue. We talk a lot about nuclear, and there's certainly, if you're interested in a nuclear project, this isn't an overnight project. This is, very intensive. It's years of planning and coordination. And so, to do that, I think, we need to be sort of building those relationships now sort of across the country and really being a resource. So I look forward to sort of seeing that continue to grow. Certainly, I'm glad that our members are sort of on board with sort of what my team's doing and saying, yeah, we want to be in the room, we want to be a resource, we want to listen, and we're more candid. I think I look at sort of the history of the industry, and it just did not feel very transparent. And I think that we've turned a corner, and as an industry we are evolving, and I hope that my organization can help kind of continue that and support that.
Yeah, and just to add to the community engagement, which we were talking about, is the path forward. And I liked what Scott said yesterday, go slow to go fast. It may seem like it takes time to talk to the community, but if you don't do it, it's never going to happen. And so I also heard yesterday, and I think it's really important, it's very difficult for the community members, wherever they are, on tribal land or far out communities, far out rural communities, to get to a public meeting. And so it's important for the industry, for the regulator, for the whole team of trying to bring a clean energy sector forward and resurrect it, be a renaissance. So let's reach out, let's meet them, meet people where they are, not meet them at the top of the mountain having a prayer or whatever. Also, I think it's really important that the community has a role in making decisions. It's not just about the industry and the regulator. The community has a role, and they can make decisions, and let's engage them in that process. What is it that they need or want? And that's what we need to find out.
Yeah, and I think we would all agree in this room, there's no question there's a nuclear renaissance that's occurring. A lot has changed over the years. I was just reading a Gallup poll this morning, 46% approval rating in the United States for nuclear. It's the highest that it's been in several decades. The amount of capital that's going in here, the signaling from the U.S. government, very bipartisan support. But I think and we've been having these discussions during this conference, is there were a lot of sins of the past and legacy issues that need to be resolved. So, from our perspective, it's how do we address that? How do we come up with a strong plan moving forward so we don't repeat those same mistakes and completely forget about these issues that have been lingering for more than 50 plus years. And as I talked about in my presentation yesterday, there really has not been a lot of meaningful work to date to address the abandoned uranium mine issue. And really it's impacting Western states primarily, and New Mexico is one of the bears that heaviest burden from the abandoned uranium mine waste. And it's an extremely complicated and complex process. I mean, you have so many different stakeholders. You're dealing with multiple federal agencies, state level, with the tribes, local communities, private industry, PRPs. And so I think getting that consensus is really tough, and getting that many different stakeholders to agree on a way forward. And I think conversations like we're having this week are extremely important for that, where we can look at it from an objective lens and what makes sense and what's practical and what's going to move the needle forward, instead of just continuing to largely stick our heads in the mud. And a lot of these problems were promulgated by the U.S. government and the Atomic Energy Commission. And I think it's going to take more than just the U.S. government stepping up. If you look at the track record, they really haven't stepped up very much to resolve these issues. And so I think it's everyone here in this room working together to push this forward. And so, yeah.
Thank you. Actually, I'm going to start Greyson's end and work back on the next one, because I think your point about everyone working together and the roles of government and the tribes and industry, can we get past the past? What does that look like to you?
Yeah, I sure hope so. That's what we're betting on at Disa, and that's our primary focus is to help resolve these legacy issues. I do think we've been doing this for almost 9 years now, and I think the amount of momentum just in recent years has picked up significantly. And I think a lot of that is driven by this nuclear renaissance and having to start really answering these tough questions. And I think, like I was saying earlier, we have to resolve these legacy issues to move forward. And I think with the amount of excitement for nuclear, that's going to help resolve a lot of these issues. And there's a lot of new stakeholders that are even coming to the table as well. A lot of conversations that weren't being had 5 years ago. So yeah, I think absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's important how we communicate and how we talk about things. I heard a number of questions here at the last couple of days, people coming forward with so much pain about the past. The question didn't seem, the question seemed easily answered by, well, it's better now, and we're not going to do that again. And that does not address the underlying emotion that is associated with the pain of the past that still is felt today. And I think the industry, advocates, legislators, people who are pro-nuclear, scientists, we all have to understand that there's two conversations. There's one about the facts and figures, and that makes total sense to someone who understands that and is pro-nuclear, but someone who has pain, that's the thing that has to be addressed. That's the conversation that has to happen. We have to understand it. We have to, sometimes the pain is so onerous that it isn't even at the surface of the question. So we have to bring that out. We have to make it a safe space to really be vulnerable with each other in order to be a team together to move forward to the future that the young people want.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would add to that, and certainly do agree that if we were ever going to take a step forward, I feel like now is that moment. And as you look at all the different public opinion polls around nuclear as compared to other energy resources, we are at all-time highs, and the Gallup polls from the surveys this morning are, really great to see. But at the same time, I think to Lynn's point, we cannot just gloss over our history. And I live in Colorado and certainly feel some of the general pains that are unique to our western states. And I think for me in my role, it's sort of how do you find that sort of balance that how do you address those really sort of personal opinions and experiences that people have lived through so that you can move forward? I don't know that there's always a solution, but I think at the very least we can listen and be a sort of a receptive voice and kind of person responding to some of the concerns and experiences. So, I think overall, yes, there's a great path forward, but sort of I have that sort of sense of caution of I don't want us moving too fast and sort of, forgetting where we came from.
I'm sitting here listening to everyone and also kind of drawing back on some of my past experiences in the last couple of years doing community engagement about the subject matter of used fuel. We essentially had a charge to provide some information about that. And in our experience, we discovered real quick, we could not talk about the end of the cycle, used fuel, without talking about the front end, which is the mining. And what came to the surface really quickly was historical wrongs that have happened in communities where we had industry and we had government not following through with their obligations and requirements. And even to today, there's still a lot of debate at in the Congress level, debating over resources to maybe correct and support some of these historical wrongs that have happened in the past. So just kind of thinking here for a second, the first thing that came to my mind is that, I guess, that Nike thing, just do it. Because when I think about what needs to happen is really more the political will to really recognize what has happened in the past and try to correct it. We just had recently, we did a moonshot. We sent, people to the moon. I mean, that cost a few bucks, right? So to me, it's all about political will and solve this problem. Put the resources to take care of those remediation issues. Because what I see, definitely in tribal communities, but probably in a larger community, it's hard to go forward on something that it might be fantastic, the greatest thing since sliced bread, new nuclear, right? But you can't get there until you deal with those front end. So I just say, let's just do it. Let's get it done. Let's stop talking about it. Let's stop doing that. We need to put our minds together and say, okay, let's get this done. Try to streamline the rules and regulations to get there, because I know that with the Disa program technologies, there was a whole issue of getting proper authorities, approvals to get the job done. And I'm over here scratching my head saying, why is that so difficult? We need to just get it done.
Thank you. I have one last question for everybody, and then I would welcome people to offer any input before we wrap up. New Mexico is blessed with an abundance of uranium resources, abundance of technical and innovative talent with the national labs, the enrichment facility. What do you see is the future for New Mexico? And I'm going to start with Scott and move down the table.
I was still thinking. Well, I think New Mexico has a fantastic future ahead of them. But it's all going to be predicated, if you will, on the people, the people that are actually here in this community to come together with a unified direction. And of course, that's going to be some hard work, but I believe there's a fantastic future here. You have many resources, and as I mentioned in my presentation, protection of land, water, and air. I think it can be done, especially if you get the community heads together and say, let's try to do something really good for the community that will essentially elevate the standards of the community for the benefit of the community, and that's all. So I think the the future is really bright. And I was really moved by the students that we listened to today, because, you know, being of the older generation, I always kid about this, heading out the door, you know, I have a lot of confidence in who, you know, the students that I saw today. I mean, bright students, looks like they're inspired, and I think they can take on the task of correcting maybe some of these issues, or bringing a brighter future, if you will, to you know, the state. So I kind of feel like everybody that's in my age group, it's time for us to get out of the way and let them, you know, take the bull by the horns and go for it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of what I do and my job is working sort of across the states. And so I'm seeing sort of all the different regions and different conversations around nuclear. And, you know, these are states with a lot of sort of existing experience with nuclear, or they're states that have really had, you know, almost no sort of interaction with nuclear and are now sort of exploring various opportunities, you know, whether it's building nuclear or being part of the nuclear supply chain. And we're at a really interesting moment where, you know, 5 or so years ago, I would have said, yeah, maybe there's 3 or 4 states that are really looking at nuclear and the future of nuclear. And now, you know, I look around the country, and I'd say there's 25 states that I would put are competitive, all in. They see nuclear as a solution, you know, to meet energy demand, you know, carbon-free, reliable, all the great attributes that come with nuclear energy. But as I look around the country, you know, no other state is like New Mexico as far as, you know, the resources, sort of the history and knowledge, the sort of expertise with the national labs. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity. You know, kind of think going back to the first question, we're at a point, it's not specific to the nuclear sector. I think it's the entire energy sector. You know, we're at a huge transition point. And I think communities have sort of power and authority that maybe they did not have in previous decades to either see projects to the finish line or not. And, you know, I think communities should sort of wield that power and be that strong voice and sort of, you know, push the energy sector in the direction that they want sort of in their communities, in their states. So a lot of potential for New Mexico, but yeah, also want to see kind of the community voice lead the way.
Yeah, so the question was, I think, you know, what is our individual visions for the future? And I think it's important to have a vision for the future as you're charting a path forward to that future. But my vision means nothing, because it's got to be a community vision. And I think a great first project would be to get a community vision described. And a vision has something for everyone, because New Mexico we should recognize that we have a big dependence on oil and gas in the state. And we have a lot of things that we have to consider with our vision. And from that vision, we can plot our path forward. But it definitely has to have tribal voices, rural voices, city voices, the voices from the lab, voices from regulators, voices from educators, voices from young people, older, wiser people, everyone. And I think it will include an energy equality picture, you know, where we don't favor one or the other energy. We want it all to go forward and to eventually, you know, get it to be cleaner and cleaner for our environment. I think safety has to be part of it. I think, you know, fixing the problems of the past has to be part of it. It's a big adventure. I'm not going to attempt to describe a vision here.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I agree with all my fellow panelists that it starts with community engagement. I believe New Mexico is poised to be a leader in this space. You know, there's The largest abandoned uranium mine is here in New Mexico. You know, the 523 abandoned uranium mine circle sites in the Navajo Nation. I mean, it's a massive problem, but I believe it also poses, you know, a significant opportunity as well to advance things forward. And, you know, out of the states that we work in, you know, from my perspective, the trauma is felt most profoundly in New Mexico as well. And I think having those conversations are really important. You know, I've had multiple engagements with local groups, and when you first sit down, you know, they say, no one's ever going to clean this stuff up. I don't even want to hear about it. I've been promised this for decades. Like, I don't even want to engage. And then, you know, after, you know, several hours of discussion, like, people are excited. And so I think, you know, but we have to follow through on that as well. And just not make fake promises and actually move things forward. So,
Thank you. This is it from the panel. I see somebody standing in the back, and I'm hoping that you wanted to add something.
Question?
Well, I just had like a few questions.
Sure.
If that's okay? Okay. Awesome. Umpiagindi sengetamu pokumpo vina kapuinge amu. Good morning. So I have a few questions, mostly for Lynn, but I guess if, you know, anybody could answer these. I guess the first question I have is, how would you convince mothers in my community who are experiencing negative health impacts like premature births, birth defects, miscarriages, reproductive cancers, and infant and maternal mortality? How would you convince them that nuclear is the way forward? And I'm speaking from like our proximity to Los Alamos National Laboratory.
Right. That's a really good question, and I'm glad you asked it, because our mission is not to convince. Our mission is to empathize and to understand and to we want to be aware of the trauma that people are having and the issues that we are having. We can provide our own stories, our own issues with childbirth, our own experience as being mothers or having cancer. We can provide our own stories, and with that we hope to connect to people on common grounds, and if they have questions, they know they can ask us because we're being honest. One of the things, I have this article written by Alehi, I'm probably mispronouncing it, Alehi Lee Caton Garcia. She's an anti-nuclear activist here, and this was in the Sunday paper. And she said, one of the things she said was, the nuclear energy industry also falsely claims that nuclear production is clean energy, and it conveniently omits the greenhouse gas emissions involved in mining, milling, enriching, and fuel fabrication, storage of waste, and transport from its carbon equation. And so I use that as an example of how we talk to each other. We do, as the nuclear industry, omit. We paint the rosy picture. Mothers for Nuclear doesn't want to do that. They want to be someone who can talk about the risks and talk about how those risks can be mitigated. I guess that's the best way I can answer that question.
Okay. And just a follow-up to that, I guess, how do you, as an individual or your organization, advocate for stricter standards to protect the most vulnerable in our communities, given that the current standard is based on the elusive reference man?
Did you want that for Mothers for Nuclear?
For anybody.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
Okay, well, as women, we know that, every medication and car seat and everything is all made for the man. But I do think we can advocate as women, as a group of women. We are 50% of the vote, and we can advocate as a block of women for ensuring that women, pregnant women, are treated with more safety than the average man. We also want to advocate that all of our workers are safe, and male, female, whatever. You know, it's important to keep workers safe. I think the ills of the past were horrible, and I just wouldn't, you know, Mothers for Nuclear wouldn't stand for it, and I don't think anybody in industry would stand for harming workers in nuclear plants anymore, or nuclear mining.
Right. And what about like the surrounding communities?
Well, I can speak to the fact that I am a breast cancer survivor, and I lived near a nuclear plant. I worked in a nuclear plant, and I was wondering, is that why I had breast cancer? But then I realized the plant boundary, the requirement is that there is 0 radiation above background at the plant boundary, 24/7. And so I asked Google, you know, where are the highest incidence of breast cancer in California? And it's in 2 counties, San Luis Obispo and Marin County. Marin County has no nuclear power plants. So that's a correlation rather than a causation. As a nuclear worker, I was heavily monitored, and when I was pregnant, I had a very stricter limit of exposure to radiation. And so I felt very comfortable, and you know, there's a lot of cancer in the world, and we don't know what causes it, and I'm a big advocate for people to, for the government to start spending more money on what is the basis for cancer, what causes it.
Maybe I can just add something that I think we ran into with our engagement, and I think it's pretty well standard. You know, we have a thing that we ask the question, what is the opposite of fear? Because most of the time when we talk in the nuclear industry, a lot of the things that come up is people are fearful of the industry, fearful of what has happened in the past, fearful what might happen in the future. And so as a tribal person, our belief is what is the opposite of fear? It's knowledge. The more knowledge we have about a subject matter, the more likely we're going to be able to deal with our concerns or fear. I say fear. And I think that is the key or the important factor. We need to hear those concerns, whether it's from mothers or any other people in the community. What is it that is a concern? And then again, in support of what Mothers for Nuclear are saying, is we want to be a trusted, honest voice to answer those questions and work together to see if there is, you know, ways to mitigate those concerns and risk. And so that's what I think is important. And I go back to the student with the coin. You know, we have both sides of the coin. We have the very educated and know, and they're fully informed and say, hey, this is not a problem. Then we have the other side of the coin, which, well, we're not feeling good about this. You got to come together and be able to talk civil, come together and say, what is the issue here? Try to get that coin to set on the edge. And so these types of events, these types of questions are very important. And if you're going to take an industry forward, whether nuclear or anything other, to be able to weigh those risks and benefits and see if you can come together with a good direction forward. So, you know, personally, I appreciate these questions coming in. I mean, I don't have I'm a male, I'm not a mother. So I'm not in tune to those concerns. And I can't really address them or deal with them until I get involved. And that's very important, that you're coming to the mic and bringing that as a subject matter that needs to be dealt with. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. I know the gentlemen in the back are telling me that I'm out of time. Did you have another question, or were you okay? You're good? Okay. Anybody else? Doug? Can you go to the mic or grab a mic? And we'll just take one more. They're telling me that it's lunchtime, and go ahead, Doug.
Okay, very quickly. Comment was just made that the calculations and the consideration for the nuclear power generation does not take into consideration the related other generation, possible things like mining and all of this. If you look online, all of the reliable estimates provide the estimate of CO2 generation, for example, including all of the other background generations of CO2. So this is
Yeah.
something perhaps they haven't seen the latest information.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I do want to address that. Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's an answer for that question about, why, the whole cycle. When you look at natural gas and coal, it's out the roof for as far as greenhouse gas and pollution goes. But for solar, wind, and nuclear, it's very low, even including those sources. But my point was, we always just talk, we give the impression to some people that we're not giving them the whole picture when we talk about how 100% of our electricity that we generate is greenhouse gas free. And so when you set up that perception that you're not telling the whole story, you have set up a situation, a relationship that isn't fully trustworthy. So all I'm suggesting is that we have to watch what we're saying in our communication and be open and honest and transparent. And that means more than telling the rosy picture.
Yeah.
Very, very good. Very, very well said. I want to wrap everything up today. I had this wonderful vision of the future. Oh, there's one more. Sorry.
Hi, Janet.
Hi.
I've been up there. I've asked several questions. I just wanted to say one thing about moving forward. I really appreciate all the concerns and the focus on cleanup of the legacy, but I like to share that even beyond that, there's the other factor that we brought forward in addressing all that, and that's healthcare. And I think that's the next big push, because out of our 2007 congressional hearing, we did get resources to do things like a birth cohort study to look at the impact of proximity and exposure for women of childbearing age. We have data now from UNM Metals program. We need to use that information going forward and set a new baseline, not just for uranium, but for all energy, I think, to chart a path forward where all this information can be put into use so that we don't make the same mistakes. And certainly environmental damage and environmental impacts are important, but healthcare and quality of life is going to always be as high a priority. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to do one last scan for anything else, but those were very good words to thank you. Oh, I have one more. Dwight?
Yeah, sorry, just real quick. So I just wanted to mention that I saw the United States flag and the New Mexico flag, and everybody, I think we have Texas here, but as a country, I just wanted to mention, because this is important, a lot of our leaders inside nuclear power, they come from a nuclear Navy, military background, and they don't let you give up, and they are so disciplined and so honest that you have no choice but to do it the right way. So I wanted to say that yesterday. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to say it right now.
Thank you very much. Going once, going twice. I really appreciate all of the panelists here today. I love the idea of a community vision, and I think we've had some very good words about moving forward. I want to thank the Santa Ana Pueblo for allowing us to be here at this beautiful facility. I want to thank every sponsor, every speaker, and every attendee for joining us and having this conversation. We've heard that we want to continue the conversation. Thank you again, and safe travels home. Lunch is in the Rio Grande restaurant, inside and out, so please, after, if you have any comments or fill in the survey, we appreciate it, and enjoy lunch, and thank you again, everybody. Thank you.